This is Scott with ClaySys. With this video today is installing and configuring the Enterprise edition of ClaySys AppForms. If you've watched any of our other prior videos, you've seen that we typically are using AppForms for SharePoint or AppForms for Office 365. Well, we also have this additional option, the Enterprise edition, which does not require SharePoint whatsoever. It simply requires you to have your own server, and then you install the Enterprise edition on your server. Now, when you get the setup package from us, what you're actually getting is this zip file. And contained within the zip file is simply two files, the executable, which is the actual setup file, and then a PDF file, which is the documentation for the Enterprise edition of ClaySys AppForms. Now, before we begin the installation, I'd like to cover with you some prerequisites that you'll need to know before you install the Enterprise edition. The operating system that you'll need is any Windows operating system that supports Microsoft.NET 4.5 or later. For the demonstration today, you can probably see on your screen, I'm using Windows Server 2012 R2. So in addition to the operating system, you will need .NET 4.5 installed and configured. You'll need to use Internet Explorer 9 or later. You'll need IIS 7 installed and configured, and then also Microsoft SQL Server. Now you can have a couple of different options here for version. You can use SQL Server 2008 R2 as long as you are on Service Pack 1 or later. You can also use Microsoft SQL Server 2012 if you prefer. Now if you're just installing this for testing and development purposes, you can also use Microsoft SQL Express if you'd like. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started on the setup process of going through and installing the Enterprise Edition. To launch the wizard, you're going to want to right-click on the executable and choose Run as Administrator. When you do, this is the first screen that you'll see. And really there's nothing more to do here other than to click Next. On this screen, it's showing you the different installation options that you have for the Enterprise Edition. Now, it looks like there's three different options. Actually, there's two different types of installations. One is the single tier installation, which is selected by default. And simply what this means is that you're installing the Enterprise Edition on a single server. That's all that means. The other options, App Server and Web Server, this is what's considered the multi-tier installation. And they go hand in hand. You cannot install one without the other. If you're in a scenario where you have a server farm and you have application servers and web servers and you want to install the Enterprise Edition across those servers and be load balanced as an example, you would first go through the App Server installation wizard, because when you're done with the App Server installation, there will be some configuration information that you get from that install that you will need to use in the web server installation. Now, we won't be going through those options today in this demo, but know that they're there, and all of those steps are indeed documented in the PDF file that you get with the setup package. All right, so we'll leave this set to single tier installation, and we'll click Next. Now on this screen, the setup wizard is simply running through a series of checks to make sure that you're running the installer as the admin user, IIS 7 is installed, .NET 4.5 is installed, and ASP.NET is configured. Notice as each check is done for those items, there is a checkbox over here that gets checked. If any of those feature checks were to fail, the checkbox would remain blank, but next to it would be a question mark icon that you could hover over and get additional information about why that specific item may have failed the pre-check. Once it's done, you'll get a message down here at the bottom showing you all checks have succeeded. So we'll go ahead and click Next. Now here is where you're building and starting the configuration of the website for the ClaySys AppForms Enterprise Edition. You get to choose the protocol you'd like, HTTP or HTTPS. You can give your site a name here, which we'll do. And then you can also choose a unique port for this particular website. So on this screen, on the initial install, this is really all you need to configure. So we'll go ahead and click Next. This is our license agreement for the Enterprise Edition. Read through this, and when finished, accept that and click Next. Now here we have some more configuration information surrounding the website. You can see that it picked up the name of our website from the prior screen, the port that we wanted to use. The IIS name is picking up the name of my server, Win Server 2012. Now the root path is where do you want to store the files, the IIS files that are needed for this particular installation. So what I'll do is I'll click the button here with the ellipses. I'll drill down through my C drive under iNet Pub I'll create a new folder here. Enterprise AppForms, click OK. You can see that gets populated, and it also creates a subfolder underneath of that for additional files that it will install. Now, the pool identity user, what this is referring to is the application pool identity account in IIS, and we just need to specify a user here. So I'm going to specify myself. All right, and I'll do a verify just to make sure I type that correctly. Good. Is load balanced. If you, again, are in a farm and you want to install this across multiple servers and have everything load balanced, you would enable this option, and here you would need to specify your load balancer name. Obviously, in a single tier installation, this is not needed, so I'll go back and uncheck that. The authentication mode, Forms or Windows, what this is referring to is how you are going to log in to the AppForms designer once this is installed. If you choose Forms mode, then when you get to the designer, you'll have to put in a username and password. By default, there is an admin user with an admin password that's in our documentation. Or you can use Windows and specify a specific user so that when that designer is opened up, it opens up under that particular user account. So I'll do that for this demonstration. All right. Now we have some advanced settings. Enable cache. I'm going to go ahead and enable that. What this is referring to is actually the caching of forms that you create through the AppForms designer, so that when you run these, those forms are cached so that your users have a better user experience. Now, we cache around 20 forms, so if your server happens to be low on storage space and you don't want to take up any space using that cache, you can uncheck that option. But if you do have the room, most servers do today, enable it. It makes a little bit better experience for your end users. The delay form load option, what this is actually referring to is delaying the form load rule. You can create rules on form load to go, for instance, get data, set settings, things of that nature. And if you are getting a lot of data when your specific form loads, it's going to delay when the user sees the form. So if you want to avoid that, you can check that option so that the form comes up, and then once the form is up, then the rule will kick in and go fetch that data for you. So again, a little bit better user experience, really only necessary if you happen to be loading just a lot of data on form load. And finally, the AppForms scheduler. What this does is allow you to launch your form at a specific configured time. So for instance, if you wanted to come up every day at noon or 3 o'clock or something of that nature, if that's the design that you need, that is what this scheduler allows you to do. You can also use the scheduler to have that form come up at multiple times throughout the day that you specify. Now, we won't be going into that option today through this demo either, but again, it is in our documentation, so feel free to read up on that if you think that might be of interest in your scenario. All right, we'll go ahead and click Next. If your environment has Active Directory and you want to take advantage of those options, you can do so here by clicking that checkbox for Enable Active Directory Settings and then filling in those options. Next. Now, this information is for your SQL Server. So I will put in my SQL Server name here, the actual server name, which is the same as my machine name. I'm going to choose Windows Authentication, and you can see that picked up my user account. The database that I'll create for this demo, and then finally create that database if it does not exist. I know it doesn't, so I want to check that. Now, before you can get the next button to light up here, you do have to test your connection to SQL Server just to make sure that you can get there. So we'll go ahead and test that. Succeeded, and now you'll see the next button lights up. All right, and that's the end of the configuration. This will now begin the installation. You can see that it's getting to your SQL Server here. The database doesn't exist. It's creating it. It's going to go through and extract files into that Enterprise AppForms folder that we created under inetpub. It will set up various services that the Enterprise version needs to be able to run and get you the ability to create forms and save those forms and whatnot. And then once all that's done, once it's completed, it's set up, you will be notified at the end of this script. And that should take just another moment or two to complete. And there we go. Installation successfully completed. Once that's done, we'll go ahead and click Next. This is a final check that makes sure that the application pool user you specified has the proper permissions, that we can get to the various AppForms services, the database, so on and so forth. This is the same as the pre-checks that are done. Once each of these checks is completed, this checkbox over here will get selected, And the same holds true here. If any of these fail, the checkbox will remain blank, but you'll get a question mark that you can hover over for more information about why that specific check may have failed. And again, once they're done, here at the bottom you'll get a message that all checks succeeded. So we'll go ahead and click Next. And finally, that's it. We're at the end of the setup wizard. If you want to be able to see what information was written to the log during setup, you can enable this checkbox and that will launch that in Notepad. But we'll just go ahead and click Finish. And what this does now is launches the actual website that we created through that setup wizard. And the default page that it brings you to for the first time installation is entering your license key. So you do have to have a license key, just like for any of our products. And if you don't have your license key when you initially install this, which normally you won't, you can choose to activate online or you can activate by email. And then once you do that, that sends information to ClaySys. We validate and then send you back a serial key. And then once you get that serial key, which I have, you simply click that button and input that serial key here. So if you'll bear with me just a moment, I will complete this process. All right. Once you've entered your serial key, simply click the Update button, and assuming that I entered it correctly, you'll get a message that says your license has been updated. Now, once you click OK to that, what you're now taken to is the default page for managing your tenant, your site for your Enterprise Edition. If we had chosen the authentication type as forms, then what you would first be brought to before you get to this page here, you'd first be brought to a page where you enter your username and password. But because we chose Windows authentication, you can see that I'm actually logged in up here as my server name and my username of Scott. So again, had we chose Forms authentication, we would be at a different page where we put in a user and password. Once that's validated, we would then be taken to this page that you see here, which is the Manage Tenant page. So that completes the actual setup and configuration of the ClaySys AppForms Enterprise Edition. The next step from here is to actually go to the designer, and that will be our next video, using the designer, the AppForms designer, with the Enterprise Edition of ClaySys AppForms. I hope you found this video to be beneficial. We are going to be creating more of these types of videos in the coming weeks and months, so be sure to check our website often for new demos. You can find all of our videos at http://www.clayssys.com/pages/viewdemo.aspx. If there's a video that you would like to see that is currently not on our site, please do let us know by sending an email to info@claysys.com, and we will do our best to get that video created for you. Again, I hope you found this video to be of benefit, and thank you for using ClaySys.